Okay, welcome back. And if you're out in the West, it has been hotter than hell. That's how hot most of the places out here have been. If you look at the top of the home page at Rense, please look at the map. We got that from Dane Wiggington. It's the NOAA map. And the question at the top is not rhetorical. It's a direct question. Does this map look normal to you? It looks insane. This is geoengineering at its worst. Look at the map. Look at Alaska. Wow. It just doesn't look like that. It's not supposed to. This is absolutely ridiculous. And it's all being created by your tax dollars. I remember back in 1996, that was the year I saw the first chemtrail that I identified as a chemtrail, a geoengineering spray trail, if you will, going right overhead. It looked like a long string of cotton candy, and then it slowly just spread out and covered half the sky. Santa Barbara, I was just laying out in the lounge looking up at the beautiful blue sky, and this great big jet went over, leaving a big white cotton candy trail behind it. And I knew then there was something wrong. There is one man who has been putting his neck on the line to help all of us understand this. He is Dane Wiggington. He is the man who has made geoengineering a household word for many. I'm going to look quickly at the map before I bring Dane on here. And it's a weak projection. Now, this is Medford, Oregon. 102 degrees today. The historic normal is about 89, 90 in that range in this area. So we had 102 today. Tomorrow, it'll go up to 110. Wednesday, it goes up to 114. Thursday, 111. Friday, 103. Saturday, back up to 104. These temperatures should not be. The normal pattern of weather for this time of year, if it were left alone, would be a lot different than this. This is absurd. Dane, welcome back, my friend. Glad to have you.
Glad to be back, Jeff, and thank you for highlighting the gravity of what's unfolding around us that people need to wake up to as fast as possible.
These now you're down the road from me about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and what was your? We had 102 today. What was your high? What's Redding? Let's talk Redding.
I believe we were forecasting 107 today. 110. We were 110 today. We're going. I think the forecast is 116 tomorrow, in that range. So, and this is what's imperative for people to remember. It's not just the daytime highs, but the nighttime low high temperatures, which are astronomically above normal. The planet is not cooling off, and people should note that as well. And that's typically not reported on much.
No, so, people don't know. No, that's right. They don't. Tonight's low here is supposed to be about 70.
Well, you're lucky. Our low last night here was 85, and we experienced a number of nights going back even over the last month at 1 a.m. in the morning in Redding, it was 95 degrees, 1 a.m. in the morning. So, I mean, these are astronomically high, quote, low temperatures. Right. And the weather whiplash scenarios that we're seeing, in fact, the map as you've posted, the very anomalous differences in temperatures from record warm over the western U.S. We have the big bullseye of blue below normal in the center, and you see around the fringes, Jeff, you see the oranges and reds again on the tip of Texas, Florida, Alaska. So it's surrounded by warmth, but you have a big bullseye of cool, and that creates the headlines, the confusion, the division over the two states of the climate that they're looking for, and this has been going on for 7+ decades. But we're at the stage now where the climate system is literally unraveling, and for the climate engineers, for them, that just means to ramp up their programs still more. Portland's going to be pushing 110, I believe, in the next 2 or 3 days. You know how hot that is for Portland. At the same time, we just had new headlines. The earliest northwest passage by a ship ever just happened, and that doesn't happen if there's more ice. Obviously, it happens if there's less. The only thing we're seeing on NASA satellite imagery, and I think I sent you a link or two on this today, is it's very recognizable sea surface chemical ice nucleation. It looks like a chemical dispersion, because that's in fact what it is. And this is what they're considering sea ice, and that's why statistically that headline is being hidden, because any form of slush on the surface is counted as ice pack. So if you have a solid ice pack that actually blows apart and disintegrates and thus covers a wider area with slush, the ice pack just got bigger.
Gotcha.
So it's important people understand the difference. And the volume, which is the mass, which is what really matters, right? We're down to about 18% of the total mass that was 30 years ago. The multi-year ice, the old ice, down to about 5%, 1/20th of what was.
So we're losing the old ice now, and that's almost gone.
Gone. All you have is surface nucleation. That's why the ships can go right through it. And part of the cooling, they're looking at the map you're looking at, high pressure dome over the west, spins clockwise around that high pressure dome, spins moisture from a trough that's in the Pacific up over the top of us while we fry, back down into the center part of the country, picking up some more moisture from the Gulf. That moisture allows them to chemically ice nucleate, creates a cool layer on the surface, because at altitude, and this is important for people, your listeners, to remember, at altitude we're seeing still, and I communicate with pilots, by the way, Gulfstream pilots and commercial pilots, and all they're seeing is positive, it's called an AST anomaly, positive temperature anomalies, which means it's much hotter than normal at altitude exclusively, nothing below normal, only hot. So these cooler temperatures you see in places are only a surface layer of cold.
So we're talking 20, 30,000 feet. Temperatures are abnormal, too. Whatever they're flying at. Oh, really?
Higher still. I mean, with the Gulfstream pilots, in fact, the first contact they made with me, two of them, one former military, both Gulfstream pilots. And these guys fly people to, during the elections, some of the bigger names. And I know these guys have important passengers. But both of them had their aircrafts forced descend from over 40,000 feet, because they were seeing 35-degree positive anomalies, 35 degrees above normal, not enough density in the air to carry that aircraft. It forced automatic emergency descents.
Wow. I get it. They lose their lift and they'll just fall like a rock.
Correct. Just like we saw in Phoenix, if you remember, about a month ago, some of the planes couldn't take off because there wasn't enough air density for them to take off from the heat. Not sure if you saw that headline. Your listeners can look that up. They were grounding some of the flights in Phoenix because the heat was so intense.
Not enough lift. I got you.
Not enough lift.
Yeah. See, people look at the air as being air. It's not. It's a medium, and planes use it for lift. Without the right air density, they can't do it. And if it gets too hot, it thins and it, right? Wow. Let's go back to the NOAA map at the top of Rense. All of you look at that map now. We don't have colors extending up into Canada. If we did, what would we be seeing in terms of the big red mass to the left of the center of the U.S.? What would that red look like over Alberta, British Columbia, and the other provinces?
Not sure if you're by your computer. I'll send you a world view map right now on that. You'd have
I'm here.
Okay, it's coming through right now. You'd have extensive heat extending through the western part of Canada. The cooler zone drops off as soon as you get into Canada. As you start to get up into the Arctic Circle, lots and lots of red. And on the map as a whole, lots and lots of red, lots and lots of above normal, with the exception being some zones in Antarctica, specifically around the Larsen Sea ice shelf, which just collapsed. I'm sure you saw that. So it appeared what they tried to do was chemically nucleate the sea surface everywhere around the Larsen Sea shelf to try to lock it into place, to perhaps keep that headline from happening for just a bit longer. Didn't work, and they're still going at it there. That's the only spot you see some anomalous blue below normal zones. But again, those are surfaces. That's besides the eastern 2/3 of the U.S. Lower 48. But the rest, you see a whole lot of red, and it's getting redder fast. And that's what people need to understand. What's happening with the climate right now, and climate engineering is making it far worse, not better, in the attempt to cover up the warming in certain places, short-term temporary toxic cool downs. They are fueling the overall meltdown of the planet. You can only do harm by interfering with the climate system, and that's what they're doing. And Jeff, also with the ozone, and I know you'll get to that when you're ready, but we can, although there's many anthropogenic factors that we can attribute to the overall biosphere implosion and the climate warming. In regard to the ozone layer, we can most directly link that to climate engineering and various aspects of climate engineering, and that's really one of the most lethal factors we face is the disintegrating ozone layer.
Is that an intentional thing that's being done, or is it a backlash from the programs that they're deploying all over the skies?
Yes and no. It appears that over the poles, over Antarctica specifically, because of the disintegrating ozone layer there, and keep in mind the geoengineering over the poles started in the mid-40s, and that actually increased the shortage of ozone there, altered wind currents, and actually helped to extend some of the sea ice there for a time because they weren't obviously concerned about the ozone layer there, which they should be, but they weren't. Right. But now, in general, over the planet as a whole, you can't put particulates in the atmosphere without destroying the ozone layer. It doesn't matter if it's a volcano or the back of a jet. It causes a molecular reaction with ozone, the particulates do, and that destroys the ozone layer. So this is a known consequence of climate engineering, and the paradox is the more they spray, the more they destroy the ozone layer, the more they feel they have to spray to make up for what they destroyed from spraying in the first place.
God, what is just beyond belief. Okay.
Keep in mind, all of this is the oxidation that's occurring at altitude, along with lots of other sources that are depleting oxygen because the forests are dying. The forest burn downs we can also most directly relate to climate engineering for a number of reasons, which I can go over if you wish. But all of this is reducing atmospheric oxygen levels. And now we have a report from Scripps Institute to outline the fact that global oxygen levels are dropping in major cities and oceans. And this report is actually extremely dire, and people don't understand.
What data are you getting about oxygen levels in cities, in urban areas now, major urban areas? Just so you folks know, before Dane answers that, it used to be that this planet had an oxygen saturation level in the atmosphere of about 35%. I'm just rounding it off. In some of the cities, it has gotten to be so bad that it's gotten down to 16, 17, 18%. That's why people in the cities are so often they're moribund, as that's the word. They just sit around. They're lethargic. They don't have the oxygen. They're living in a very toxic environment. So what are you getting about the urban oxygen content?
Well, everything you stated is exactly on target. People don't realize that the paleo data with those high oxygen levels is why we had such large mammals living on the planet for certain times. You need that high oxygen level to support that type of life. Some of the reports indicate that O2 levels in some of the urban areas are even dropping in the lower teens right now. And here's from Scripps, we have this statement. If atmospheric oxygen levels are dropping 2 or 3, I'm reading right from the report, 2 or 3 percentage points more in certain regions will end life on the planet. And now this is a little excerpt from Scripps, but people don't understand the balance that was here, the energy balance with the planet, and that's what many people don't take into account. Any form of human activity that disrupts the energy balance is a form of geoengineering. It doesn't matter whether it's cutting the forest down, paving the planet, polluting the ocean, but especially the intentional interference with Earth's energy balance, which is climate engineering. And as with so many other forms of human activity, the consequences are never even understood, let alone considered.
Never even understood. Yeah, I'm with you on that too. Would you resend what you sent me? I don't think it's not getting here. Try it again.
I'll try one more time.
There was an issue that you mentioned that I want to bring up now. It has to do with traditional, historically projected climate modeling maps. And you mentioned that you were studying the maps back in the mid-90s, and the normal summertime climate patterns are gone now. They're just gone. It's like the atmosphere doesn't know what to do. It's just sitting there, degrading and falling apart. You're not seeing any highs or lows moving around here now. It's all just sitting there.
It is, and they can park highs or lows in any given spot if they choose to. For example, what you see over Florida and the Gulf, even though we have record warm ocean temperatures there, nothing ever develops for any significant cyclonic rotation. Nothing develops, and people should really take pause and consider that the rest of the world, like, for example, the Philippines, Jeff, with a leader there that has basically told the U.S. to get out. They've been hammered over and over with record cyclonic activity, but yet we're in a 12-year drought for major hurricane impacts in the U.S. Why? Because the flooding is already so severe without the hurricane that they're trying to keep the U.S. population from panicking. But what happens, and many would think that's a good thing, right? We're suppressing hurricanes. Horrible, horrible activity in that it stops the mixing of the oceans that causes further ocean stratification, Canfield Ocean, a lifeless, stratified, oxygenless ocean. It interferes with atmospheric ozone replenishment. It's part of the Earth's hydrological cycle. You can't interfere with that without a problem. So, again, from every direction, this weather whack-a-mole with the ability to actually create high-pressure zones like what's over the West right now. When they heat the atmosphere, you know this, compressing air heats that air. They can keep that high pressure there as long as they want. Thus, we have the ridiculously resilient ridge over the West in order to cool parts of the East and parts of the Arctic as well. That convection that's happening in Florida right now, which nothing ever starts to rotate, they float that up the eastern seaboard toward Greenland, where it's being chemically nucleated the whole way. That cools the surface layer in the ground and helps them try to statistically hide the fact that the ice is imploding.
Wow. Okay, I got your map.
At the cost of making it worse overall. I should add that caveat. Everything they do, so people don't think there's any benevolence here, everything they do causes far more overall harm than any perceived good.
Right. Well, that's been my observation as an outsider for a long time.
Did you get that map?
Yes, I did. Wow.
Okay.
Wow. The idea of controlling hurricanes, I want all of you to think, wherever you are living in the world, and people all over the place, you don't have to be living in the U.S., but you know hurricanes and you know how they affect the U.S. You've all seen maps and you track these things. When is the last time you can remember seeing a hurricane move into the Gulf of Mexico? Katrina. There's been nothing since Katrina. And Katrina did some very weird things in terms of its movement and direction. Now, you made an interesting statement. To keep the water from stratifying, hurricanes are necessary. It's like if you have a glass of whatever. It's got a lot of different elements in it. It's a liquid, and you stir it up and you're going to drink it. What happens if you stop stirring it? Things start to stratify. They start to settle out. They start to degrade. And same thing with the oceans, yes? That's what hurricanes do. They stir that water up. They stir that glass of juice you're going to drink up. They got to keep it moving, but it's not happening. Is that right?
It's not happening. And again, with the myopic agenda, one of the agendas of climate engineering, again, it's important for people to understand, and I know you know this, that there are many, many agendas being carried out, and many of them can only be considered very, very nefarious. But one of those agendas is to reduce overall atmospheric RH, atmospheric relative humidity, because water vapor is also a greenhouse gas, but that's a very tunnel-visioned approach to what's happening on the planet. The planet knows how to cool itself better than we do. The cyclonic rotations are part of what puts more cumulus clouds, more moisture in the atmosphere. And Jeff, you know, when a big puffy cumulus cloud floats between you and the sun, you have a major instant cool down. But when you have the climate engineering particulate haze above you, often it's unimaginably hot with unimaginable UV. And so what they're doing is not creating any sort of overall cooling effect. It's trapping more heat than it deflects, again, destroying the ozone layer, poisoning everything on the surface. This is simply why I'm focused on this issue, and I know I've said this many times, but it's important for people to consider. Of all the challenges we face, if we can't breathe without inhaling what they're dispersing at altitude, if it's destroying the planet's life support systems, must we not consider that to be priority number one?
Well, we lose the planet. We'll lose it through geoengineering. That's one way we're going to lose it.
And even with the the risk of Fukushima, which, you and I both know how immense that is.
Yeah.
But to weave that back into climate engineering for your listeners again, we have a completely decimated atmospheric layers, and we get a large CME, coronal mass ejection, at this point, and we have grids shut down all over the globe. Now we have 100 Fukushimas, or 200. So, that road leads back to climate engineering as well. So, I mean, it's simply the hole in the bottom of the boat we must plug.
The hole in the bottom of the boat. What would happen if everything stopped? No more spraying, no more major geoengineering. How would the planet react? Would it immediately, or it would try to go back to its old normal modeling maps that we've seen? You've studied them. You'd have highs and lows moving around. You get healthy wind movement. I don't know what the jet stream would do, but the Earth would recover, correct? If we stop.
I don't know that anybody can answer that completely, but I would, based on paleo data, because we have other epochs in the Earth's history, the Pedum event 55 million years ago, the Pliocene epoch 5 million years ago, we have other epochs to compare with. And the equilibrium periods after this type of event, we have methane mass expulsion happening right now, and that's a very important one for your listeners to consider.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that before we're done, too. Yeah.
So if we shut everything off, the scientific scenario is called double catastrophe scenario, and the climate backlash is horrific. But we must allow that to happen if we're to have any chance, I would argue. And again, we're on uncharted territory. Nobody can definitively answer that. But the damage done will not reset in any time frame that matters. Does that mean that the planet will not support life and that's carved in stone? No. It means that we may still be able to salvage something, but we will not know the planet we've known in any time frame that matters. But it's still worth fighting for, right, Jeff? Anything left is worth fighting for.
Yeah. What we're talking about here, and what Dane is so eloquently explaining, is a situation that is so catastrophic and so dire, his word, and it's a good one, that most people wouldn't accept it. They just don't want to hear about it. Understood. I get it. I understand about the current younger generations and how they've been brainwashed and basically deconstructed to where they're not proactive about life. But they are going to lose. We're all going to lose. In fact, we've lost so much already. Hold on just a minute. We'll come right back with Dane Wiggington. Look, please, at the information under his name in guests. All very important. I would urge you to look at them, share them, and we'll be right back. Okay, and welcome back. We're talking with Dane Wiggington, and there is no information more critical, crucial, or important, or threatening to your life. If you're right now out west, and you're angry about the heat, you have every right to be, but you got to be aware of the fact that this is being done intentionally. This isn't just nature. This is the human species doing this. And if any of you are thinking about taking the kids to the store, or the pets in the car, think again. Don't do it. Leave them home. Stay home. Don't go until the evening if you have to go. I'm sick of these stories. 2 children die, left in car 10 minutes in Texas or somewhere. For God's sakes, a car will heat up to 160 degrees in minutes. And people do this. Why? Some people are just that stupid. All right, let's go back to the methane thing. Now, all across the bottom of the ocean, the big oceans, all of them, is a layer of, I guess it's mostly frozen methane at the bottom, methane hydrate. Now, as the oceans warm, this stuff begins to melt, this methane ice, and it begins to rise as gas up the ocean, and it comes through the ocean and into the atmosphere, increasing the level of methane gas in the atmosphere. Tell us what can happen with that, Dane.
This is critical for people to understand. And, if I could revisit the important story you just mentioned about the cars heating up.
Oh, yeah.
UV radiation is a much more penetrating heat, and it causes that vehicle interior to heat up much faster than we've historically seen. And that's important for people to understand and consider. We're getting massive amounts of UV radiation on the surface because of the ozone layer destruction right now. And that UV radiation is also killing plankton, back to the O2 decrease that we talked about earlier. Plankton, largest source of oxygen production on the planet. All of these all link together. Back to the methane.
Oh, yes. Hold on.
Yep.
We'll go there in a minute. This is important. UVB, I used to own a tanning salon years ago, and I'm pretty familiar with A and B and all that. UVB, a maximum in a tanning bed is 6%. I don't know what it is in nature normally, a normal range, but it's so off the chart now. And that's why when you go out, if you've noticed any of you, even with a shirt on, your skin feels almost like it's stinging sometimes. That's UVB. And there are measurements, according to Dane, that I've heard from him directly, that are pushing 40 and 50% UVB. That's insane. It should be 5, 6, 7%.
You're exactly right with your statistics, and we are told by all official agencies like WMO, World Meteorological Association, NOAA, NWS, National Weather Service, that no more than 5% of incoming UV should be UVB. We're seeing readings as high as what you mentioned, 40, 50%. We're also getting UVC on the surface. That's the last band of UV radiation before X-ray. I think that's quite clear that that's harmful, extremely harmful. This is the level of UV radiation they use to sterilize labs. It's raining down on us, DNA-altering band of UV radiation. We'll publish more we have a NASA engineer working directly for us, former NASA engineer, and critical data he's putting out. We'll publish more on that soon. Back to what you mentioned about the high-pressure heat dome not being natural. You're exactly right. Most people can't begin to comprehend that such a phenomenon could be created by man. It can, and it is. That's what the ionosphere heaters are for, massively powerful. I know you know what these are, Jeff, but for your listeners, the microwave transmitters all linked together, heating areas of the electrically reactive ionosphere.
HARP, ladies and gentlemen.
There you go.
HARP.
And many other facilities like it. So they can park this high-pressure dome over us as long as they want. And at minimum, we have to consider the West a climate sacrifice zone. It's being used to heat inland. And as you mentioned, the IPCC manuals, largest scientific panel ever created in human history on any subject. I have those manuals going back to 95. Without climate engineering, because of the process of biosphere damage that was occurring, the heating that would occur in inland areas along the North American West Coast, similar conditions that we had in the Pliocene epoch 5.2 million years ago, we would have a much more rainy, wet western U.S. as we had then, not the parched, dried, burning U.S. And the climate engineers are the ones altering this equation, because as the inland areas heat, we'd have more onshore flow, we'd have much more precipitation coming from the Pacific, but they are altering the entire equation. And this can't be disputed if one examines the data.
Right. Thanks for the map on Hurricane Matthew. If, again, some of you don't get the fact that hurricane direction can be changed, please put that in your head and let it sit there at least. They can, they are, and they will be continually changed in terms of direction, formation, intensity, all of it. It's all under the umbrella of electromagnetic fields, pulsing energy, HARP. They're 20, 30 years ahead of what they'll ever tell you in the media. And they're playing games with things that they should never touch. They're dangerous, and they're going to blow it. In fact, maybe they already have. Go ahead. Let's talk about methane gas.
In many ways, yeah. The trigger's been pulled in many ways, and we're through the guardrail. In regards to methane, it appears as if as much as 50 gigatons may have released. The last methane maps we just saw of Northern Hemisphere is completely saturated with atmospheric methane. Even at 20,000 feet, readings as high as 3,000 ppb, parts per billion. And it's important for your listeners to understand how potent a greenhouse gas methane is. And this is where the science community lies to us also. They always state it's 20 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas, which sounds bad enough. But over a 10-year time horizon, it's 100 to 120 times more potent. Over a several-month period, it can be close to 1,000 times more potent. It's unimaginably powerful greenhouse gas, and it's migrating, thawing methane deposits on the seafloor. It triggers a feedback loop, Jeff, as you know. Migrates through the water column, hits the surface, migrates into the atmosphere because methane's lighter than air, begins to heat even more ocean warming, more methane thawing. The process feeds itself, and we have perhaps as many as 50 feedback loops in swing right now, and we are truly on a runaway train, and those who don't believe that will soon.
Ignition point for methane, is there a ppm that'll get to, we'll get there and it could potentially explode?
There's many variables, and it depends on a lot of other atmospheric gas levels as well. In the case of, for example, hydrogen sulfide, which releases often with methane as well, and that's heavier than air. And when you get those pockets settling on the surface, is it possible at some point you could have an apocalyptic scenario where you have big pockets of that gas build up and it's ignited by perhaps lightning or some other source, and could we have some sort of firestorm that would be unimaginable? Yes, that is absolutely possible.
Okay, the big fracture in the Antarctic. We lost that enormous shelf. I read another story, did I not, yesterday or the day before? There's another big crack they're watching and worried about now. That wasn't the only one.
It wasn't, and it won't be. And the Larsen C, just like with Larsen A and Larsen B, that's the buttress that holds, it's the cleat that holds the land-based ice from sliding in. So now with Larsen C, which is much bigger
it'll slide
than
off
Larsen,
the continent into the ocean. You got to remember that, folks. The Antarctic is land. The Arctic is not.
And that triggers all sorts of other processes. In fact, we have, again, in the feedback loops, and you mentioned the algae, and for some health issues, which is extremely beneficial. I don't argue that. Other forms of algae that are not taken into the climate modeling as well, we have happening in Greenland right now. The ice is turning dark because it's warming.
Yeah.
And certain species of algae are forming that's turning the ice dark. This is on top of the fires.
Amazing.
You saw that. So on top of the fires that are settling soot down in the ice, turning it dark as well, then you have the moulins, which are the holes, the tunnels through the ice in which the meltwater seeps, flows, lubricates the glacier from below, from the rock, making the glacier slide even faster. Everything starts to feed itself, and that's what's happening. And then as you have the land-based ice mass, the weight, begin to diminish, for example, off of Greenland, you start to get what's called glacial rebound, which means the landmass below, as the weight is lifted from it, begins to actually rise up out of the sea, which displaces even more water, which forces even more sea level rise. So you have all these compounding factors.
Wow, interesting. I'd never heard of that before. You wouldn't think that, but yeah, for sure.
It's a very significant. In fact, your listeners can look that up. Glacial rebound is already affecting Greenland, and there are already some harbors that are being considered at what point will they become unuseful, because the rebound can be staggering. And, you know, you have 2 miles of ice in places of Greenland, and the weight is unimaginable, and it is a major factor, the glacial rebound.
Wow. Okay. Back to the West Coast. We're going to see this pattern all the way through the month of August. The temperatures won't be as high. They're forecasting temperatures basically to drop down into the 90s up here, high 80s, 90s as the month progresses, and the planet begins to tip back on its axis. So we've got time, and we have to be careful with this. Do you see any possibility of a breakthrough? Are they going to back off on this? Have they ever done this? When they get off on a tangent like this, do these people with these ionosphere heaters ever say, geez, you know, do you have any sense, Dane, that they're saying we might have gone too far? Is there any common sense in there?
The only thing they know how to do, that it appears so far, is to double down and do more. And in regard to the predictions for lower temperatures, if we go back 8 weeks, none of these high temperatures were predicted. But as each week passes, and they are unable to... Oh,
they're revising all the time. Yes.
All the time, and always upward.
If they keep this ridge parked here, we're going to have 100-plus degree temperatures for the whole damn month, basically. And
that's so far what has happened. And this is directly related. I've watched this for over a decade. It's directly related to the rate of ice extent, which is surface area melt in the Arctic. And this pattern that they have set up with the ridiculously resilient ridge frying the west, cooling the east, pumping that up toward Greenland, is part of the scenario. It's very complex that they are using to try to maintain what little ice is left, but at what cost, Jeff? Again, at the cost of destroying everything else. And back to what you mentioned when you shut everything off. Your listeners may know we had a slight window of time after 9/11 when all the aircraft were grounded over the U.S. for them to monitor what happens when all the aerosol dispersion stops. As expected, daytime highs went up about 2 degrees. That's monumental for that short a period. But nighttime lows went down. And so the climate engineers use this as a justification behind the curtain to ramp the programs up even more. Look, if we stop, it's going to heat up. But where their myopic vision comes into play, what would happen if 2 or 3 weeks passed, if the hydrological cycle kicked up, if we had cumulus clouds floating around instead of their sprayed haze that's destroying the planet's natural ability to make clouds? Because when you kill plankton, plankton are part of the marine cloud layer process, and we're killing the plankton. So back to every level, the more they spray, the more they destroy the natural processes, the more they feel they have to spray. This is certainly the definition of insanity, is it not?
Absolutely. The idea of destroying plankton in any significant amounts is certainly part and parcel. Yeah, it is game over. And when you have whales washing up on the beaches of the northern hemisphere at 4 and 5 and 10% of the normal body blubber coverage, they're starving to death. They have died from the lack of plankton and krill and other small things that are dying. So you break a link in the food chain, it's not repairable. It doesn't come back.
That's the foundation of the food. That's the foundation of life on Earth, really, plankton.
That is the foundation of life on Earth.
And with people, two important points to consider that are very simple. There can be no legitimate discussion about the state of the climate without, first and foremost, including climate engineering. And next, there can be no legitimate discussion about climate engineering without including the chemical ice nucleation element, because many people in the anti-climate engineering community are not even investigating, let alone discussing, let alone considering the chemical ice nucleating element. And that's how these cool downs are created. That's how they make snow over the pyramids at 50 degrees, creating a headline that creates all the division and confusion. And we need people in the anti-geoengineering community to recognize that for what it is. That's an engineered event, period.
What you're saying, Dane, is that there's really, tragically, no easily accessible common ground between the two camps. And unless,
there needs to be.
There has to be.
Yeah, there needs to be. We need to unite the tribes, and if they consider these basic elements, that again, you can't discuss the climate without discussing climate engineering, because all the environmental groups, amazing hypocrisy, turning two blind eyes to climate engineering, and in the anti-climate engineering community, they must recognize and acknowledge and consider chemical ice nucleation is the source of these cool downs that many people want to jump up and down as proof there's no global warming, and that's exactly the narrative the climate engineers want them to do. And we need to unite the tribes, recognize the engineered events for what they are, and recognize we can't discuss the climate without discussing climate engineering first.
In the winter, such as it is, we have chemical ice nucleation, I guess, commonly now, correct?
Constantly.
And that's why we see these stories about snow that doesn't melt, or snow that you put a blowtorch on it, all kinds of things. There are a lot of YouTube videos. Yeah. Exactly. So they're spraying all the time. As Dane said in the beginning, they're not just doing one thing. They're doing a number of things that would probably shock and frighten every one of you who has a streak of common sense. They're turning the atmosphere into an enormous medium through which and by which they can induce disease states in humanity. They can control human thinking, emotions. They can do so many things to our lives and our behaviors. It's not just what we're talking about in this hour. They're using the atmosphere for all kinds of things. That's the disgusting part. And when we get to this G5 cell network, which is coming, Dane, the cell phone towers alone are spewing electromagnetic frequencies and signals that influence how we think, how we live life. And these G5 things are going to be just like smart meters on a house, but way worse.
Way worse. You're exactly right. I mean, that network by itself, the threat can't be overstated. And we are an electrical organism. Life is electrical in nature, and we need to consider this. And for your listeners, so they don't feel helpless, I mean, this is certainly dire information, and the threats we face are existential. We're in a very short time horizon if we remain on this course. But what do we do? How do we arm people? We're trying. With our limited, resources and manpower, Geoengineering Watch, we're doing everything we can to try to provide something to arm the population. Jeff, did I send you some of those 20-page informational booklets that we just produced?
I got them. They're absolutely sensational, and I tried to put them in 2 banks, and they wouldn't take them because they don't take handouts, so I'm going to go elsewhere with them.
Yeah, this is where it's funny. You can go into health food stores or institutions that claim to care about the environment, and they don't want to.
No, they'll also. Yeah.
They'll turn.
Well, if we have to do it for you, we'll have to do it for everybody. That kind of. So.
Well, yeah, as if we shouldn't all join hands and try to keep the ship from sinking. But we're going to try to offer tools at just the cost of producing, packing, and selling.
They're sensational. How do people get them to hand out? And these are just great.
Posting on GeoEngineering Watch now on our site again. Like we have a package for 20 of those booklets. It's like getting 20 color glossy books that are the most hardest hitting data images we have in a package that just basically pays for our costs for packaging, shipping, and so forth. So you get 20 of those for, I think we're $30 for 20 books, and then you can pass those on to others. And we're just trying to. We've given materials away historically, but we've gone completely under doing that, and we're just trying to cover and not go into the red any further. So we're trying to provide the materials people need to effectively and efficiently wake up those around them. People can go to geoengineeringwatch.org and take a look at those activist materials that we're trying to get out in the field so we can start having the credible data to actually wake people up and make them understand. Like that booklet contains Senate documents, NASA photographs, patents.
Right.
There's hard data in that booklet, and if that's not enough to wake somebody up, then you're pounding your head on the sidewalk. You should move on. The
one-page flyers come out with the package as well?
Yes, and there'll be also a package of their own of the single-page flyers, which you get. There'll be, I don't know how many of those, 100 and something.
Boy, they are sensational. They're stunning.
And we're doing those as well. And those are flyers that we get printed in such quantity, Jeff, that you'd pay, for that color glossy 100-pound flyer, you'd pay a couple bucks each in Kinko's, and we get them for a tiny fraction of that and passing them on for what we pay just to get them out in circulation, because we don't have a lot of time. We have to wake people up fast. And having something like that to give to someone is exponentially more effective than pointing at the sky and ranting. So if we arm ourselves with credible data, pass it on without too much of a tirade, don't go into information you can't follow through with and explain properly, pass on the data.
Just hand them the materials.
Yes.
Good.
Yes,
exactly. Get the flyers, the single-page flyers, if nothing else. Get the books. Get a package of both. You won't find anything more stunningly beautiful to hand people. You cannot ignore them. They're that powerful, the imagery. You've really captured it. It's there. Now, let me jump back. 6 months ago, we were worried about rains, the Oroville Dam, overflowing, maybe losing the dam, the emergency water overflow channels, the two of them that were there. One was lost, the concrete, and the other is just a rock overflow down the hillside. We were in a rain deluge 6-8 months ago. What do you see this fall?
They control the spigot, so they can obviously turn it on and off. And even the Oroville Dam, we watched the RF radio frequency microwave transmitters, and they were controlling that flow, and they create headlines to make people think that So this is certainly they create a lot of theater to give people impressions that the drought is ended, everything's fine. It's anything but. The fuel moistures this year dropped more precipitously, faster than any other point in history here. I mean, it's bone dry here in spite of the rain. Yeah. And that's where the drying out of the atmosphere I mentioned earlier in the show, it immediately overwhelms whatever moisture we got, puts us right back into flash drought. And that's a new term, by the way. Flash drought is a new term, just like the new clouds we have, and that are just being named as if they didn't exist before, and they didn't exist because we didn't have climate engineering before. So people need to wake up, hold their local officials accountable, hold their local news media accountable, pass this kind of data on, and
pass the book and the flyer to all of your city councilmen, all of your county supervisors, and demand some kind of a response.
And you can email credible data as well, which makes it very easy. In fact, you can email a full PDF for that booklet without even having to get any. So if you email that to, for example, your local meteorologist, your local news anchor, and CC about 50 other prominent local people with it, so that everybody's seeing the conversation, so that everybody knows that those people have been given hard data and they're now responsible for investigating it. And so you can
put
start
it on
to put
them.
the fire under people.
Absolutely. What worries me is arsonists. We're getting to the point now where if they or whomever, or the lunatics out there, and I don't want to give anybody any ideas, wanted to go crazy, another month of this and the whole place could be burning.
It will. And to put some statistics behind that, we've lost in recent years 50 to 100 million acres of forest per year. In fact, there's a recent headline: Nebraska-sized area of forest disappeared in 2015. 50 million acres from fire and logging. It's unimaginable. And again, all that carbon goes into the atmosphere. Yeah. Now we have a blackened section of Earth which absorb more heat. It's all of these feedback loops feed into themselves. Siberia lost about 100 million acres, I believe, in 2013. Unimaginable swaths of forest disappearing. Right. And forest, by the way, boreal forest, second largest source of oxygen on the planet, disappearing by the day.
And they're still whacking down the rainforests.
They are.
In Brazil,
they are.
All the way up into Central America. They don't get it's just disgusting.
It's Dane? A runaway train of insanity, but I would argue again, if we could bring climate engineering to the light of day, we would galvanize populations all over the globe in a common cause, that they would know they're not only expendable to their governments, but an increasing liability. We would perhaps be able to overturn this paradigm. Doesn't mean our challenges are over, but if we can expose and stop climate engineering, so much would come to the surface with it, and we would have taken a quantum leap in the right direction by allowing the planet to respond on its own. That must be allowed to happen.
I couldn't have said it any better in 100 years. This is the most important information you will ever get about the planet you live upon and the atmosphere upon which you depend to maintain your quality of life. And that's the truth. This is it. Get the flyers, get the books. You can do it with PDF, but when you hand those flyers to people, and I've done it, and they look at that and they say, you got to be kidding. No, I'm not kidding. You don't have to go into a big dissertation. Just hand them the flyers.
Correct.
It's there. Dane, thank you on behalf of everybody who cares for everything you've done. It's amazing.
My gratitude to you, Jeff, for your endless voice for the common good. Thank you very much for giving this issue the attention it deserves.
We'll talk soon. You take care.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
Dane Wiggington, GeoEngineeringWatch.org. Please visit. Please look around. Please understand. All right, we'll be right back. 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 All right, we'll be right back.